So now, Donzel Leggett. So as you can see on the screen, Donzel is a very talented and accomplished professional. I've known Donzel for many years from my time working at General Mills. And what you see on the side here is an extremely abridged version of his bio. There's not enough pages or slides in this deck to capture all of the work that he's done, the work that he continues to do, and the impact that he's having on the community. So I'll leave this here. I won't read that, but I will share my perspectives having known Donzel and having worked with him. Three things that I've learned from my experience with Donzel, and one thing that I just learned when I received the bio. The first one is he is passionate, and that'll be crystal clear when he starts speaking. Whatever he says, it comes from deep within and his gut and his heart, and so you'll feel that as he shares his perspective. He talks about the work that he's doing with ARC, and he talks about the work he's doing as a leader. The other thing I would say, he pushes himself and others to do more and to be better. And when I was doing the debrief and prepping for this session, he challenged me, this part of that debrief. I thought I was doing some good stuff. And he's like, yeah, that's okay, but it's not fixed. So you have more work to do. I have more work to do. We all have work to do. And so this conversation might be a little bit uncomfortable for people because he's going to be candid and transparent. And this topic is important, but I'm confident you will be pushed to do more. And I think we all should do more because the issue isn't resolved. And until it's resolved, there's always work for all of us to do. And then I would say he's all in. He created ARC. He's on boards. He's doing all kinds of things that are above and beyond what you would expect. And it was interesting. I had a conversation with Donzel when we were prepping, and I was like, "You're doing this and this." And then I'm on LinkedIn. It's like midnight, and then I see an email post come through. If you're traveling, feel free to book your travel with us. I'm like, Donzel, you're doing a travel agency too? And so I was like, save something for the rest of it. So again, if you think you're doing a lot, you probably are, but Donzel is doing more. And one of the questions I'll talk to him about is, what drives him, what pushes him to do more, and what drives his ambition and pursuit of continuing to achieve higher levels of success. And then the last piece, which was new for me that I learned at Donzel when you sent over the bio and this glamour shot here, is that Donzel is clearly also a GQ model. So I thought I'd maybe highlight that because this was new for me. So I'll let him share that new information as he shares his update. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Donzel Leggett as he talks about ARC, and then we'll move over to our fireside chat. So Donzel, thanks for joining us.
Eric, you're making me laugh, man. You should be a comedian. You give Chris Rock a run for his money. You're making it's all too good to be true, man. It's all too good to be true. But man, I really appreciate you having me here and being able to speak to this group. Some have been looking forward to a great deal, and I'm going to try to be fairly short in talking about the Anti-Racism Commitment Coalition, so that we can get into some Q&A with a fireside chat. But this is something that I'm very passionate about. I have a lot of passions, but certainly this is one that I'm putting a lot of my time and energy in. And so our vision at ARC, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you kind of an overview of ARC. I'm going to talk about the vision, talk about the mission. Then I'll take you on a journey of kind of why I started it, what we're all about, what we're doing now, what we've accomplished, and what we need from you. So our vision is to build a racism-free world. It's highly aspirational, as you can tell, but we believe that if you want to do something great, you have to set great stretch goals. And as Eric said, our view is that as long as racism still exists, you haven't done enough. All of us are doing something, but I have to push myself every day to say I'm not doing enough as long as racism exists anywhere in the world. And certainly we know we have more than enough work to do just here in the United States. But this is our vision, and we are aggressively pursuing it. If you go to the next slide, Eric, our mission on how we're going to do that is to inspire, to educate, and to support you to transform yourself and your network to take action, to be anti-racist, and to spread anti-racism. Now we'll talk more as I get into why I started the organization, what we're doing differently. But I'd say that this is a very targeted mission, and it's really all about getting people to transform themselves and to transform the people around them. And so, Eric, if you go to the next slide, I want to start now by just taking you back to 1 year and 1 day ago. because that really was the trigger that forced me to do something with art. Prior to George Floyd's murder, I had been engaged. I had been doing things. I ran for office because I felt like somebody needed to do something. I was involved in the community. I was speaking out. But when George Floyd was murdered, I remember my son sent me a text. I think he was in California at the time, saying, "Hey, you hear about, what the police did to the man in downtown Minneapolis?" And these days, you're never surprised that somebody has been brutalized or killed by the police, someone of color. It wasn't until the next day when I saw that video, and the subsequent days after that, that I really began to be angered. I'll put it that way. Then my anger grew because I started getting texts and emails, mainly from white people, mostly white colleagues, basically saying stuff like, "I'm very sorry this happened, Donzel," to someone they didn't say it, but to a black person. "My heart goes out to you. My heart is broken." And the more I got these texts and these emails, the angrier I got, because not one of them said anything about whether they were upset or whether they were angry. Not one of them seemed to be outraged that this happened to a human being. And none of them said that they were going to do anything different. And I remember this very distinctly because one of my neighbors, he's like the board association director, sent me a note about my lawn being 1 inch over the line of the sidewalk or something like that. And I remember texting him back and saying, "Why don't you give me a call? Because what I don't understand is why you would send me an email about grass being 1 inch over the line on the sidewalk when a human being was just freaking killed 30 minutes from our house and people are protesting and you're worrying about grass." So it was those things that really started boiling over and making me realize that I didn't like how this was going. Even on some of our Zoom calls, of course, we were in the pandemic, people, again, it's very sad what happened to George Floyd, but then they were talking about, going to their cabin and stuff like that. And the more I heard these things, the angrier I got. So I made a video, and I targeted the video very specifically to people in the suburbs, mainly white people, who I felt were not in the game and who I felt needed to get in the game if this was going to change. And I wanted them to feel accountable and I wanted them to feel shook. So I sent this video. If you haven't seen it, it's still out there. I put it out on social media. I knew that it would get people upset because I called out people in places like Edina, people who live on Lake Minnetonka, people who are going to their cabins and not speaking out, standing up, taking action to stop racism. And I mean, there were some other things I said. You check it out. But I knew that it would create some uncomfortable feelings in boardrooms, and here certainly in Minneapolis and other places. After I sent that video out, certainly there was some blowback in some places, but the majority of the feedback I got from people, not just in the U.S. but all over the world, was, "Man, we hear you. I'm pissed off too. I'm angry too. It's no more time for heartbreak. We have to do something. But Donzel, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. I'm only one person. How can I make a difference?" And so as I got these responses, I started trying to assess, well, what could be next? As I looked at some of the organizations that were trying to fight racism, I felt like there weren't any that were targeted toward holding people accountable to change themselves, to transform themselves, and to transform the people around them. And I felt like if I could create an organization like that, then every single person has a role. There's no way you can say, "I can't do anything." If you don't want to go march, to the Capitol in St. Paul, fine. If you don't want to go stand on the street and get rubber bullets shot at you, fine. If you don't want to put a video out to everyone in the world declaring what you're about, fine. But what you can do is you can target the people in your immediate network, the people who you're closest to, and I guarantee you there's people in that group that are not anti-racist, and I'll guarantee you there's some in there that are racist. And you can hold them accountable to transform, or you can walk away from it. I mean, I broke it down that simply. Everybody can do that because racism only survives because we allow it to. We tolerate it. We have beer with a guy that might be a racist. We say that, well, this person's a Christian. Yeah, they don't really line up on the right side of things, but they're a good guy. I like golfing with this guy. Yeah, he says some things off color. I'll tolerate it. My Uncle Joe, I just got to deal with him a couple times a year. I'll my grandfather, my kids, they hear him say these bad things. As long as we tolerate racism will never go away. So our view was, let's create an organization that forces people, that trains them and transforms them to then equip them to transform the people in their network. And that's really what differentiates us. We said that, hey, we're going to be open to everybody. Doesn't matter where you come from, doesn't matter, what race you are, if you want to call it that, ethnicity, color, I don't care what it is, you're welcome to join ARC. I don't care what language you speak, you're welcome to join ARC. Doesn't matter what country you're from, you're welcome to join. I don't care if you're LGBTQ, IA, Two-Spirit, we want you to join ARC. If you're a Republican or a conservative, we want you to join ARC. If you're a Christian, we want you to join ARC. A Muslim, we want you to join ARC. A Hindu, we want you to join ARC. However, you have to put anti-racism above those views. If you can't do that, then you're probably not going to be part of the organization. You're not going to be part of the movement. Now, what we want is for someone who's close to you to be part of the organization. We'll help them build the capability to work on you. But our view is, if we're going to eliminate racism, then the treatment of humanity and the understanding that anti-racism, meaning recognizing that structural and systemic racism exist, recognizing that they emanate from white supremacy, and recognizing that to eliminate it, we have to stand up against it and destroy the systems and the structures that allow it to exist. And that means the least you can do is hold the people in your network accountable to convert to anti-racism. Everyone can do that. So what have we accomplished so far? So we started with a group of about 6 volunteers. And this was back October 1st. So we officially became an organization. We launched on October 1st. So what are we, about 7-8 months later, we're over 50 volunteers. We have a board of directors, about 13 folks. We have 7 departments of dedicated volunteers, whether it's in marketing. We have an organization that kind of makes sure we're complying with all the regulations that are out there for 501c3s. We have an IT department that works on our website. We have a events group and resources group that ensures that we've got the right resources when people visit our site, plans events. Our next event is planned for June, I think it's June 12th, which will be youth that will be speaking about their perspective on anti-racism. Just so you get a good perspective, we have a diversity built into our organization. So we wanted to make sure that our board was going to be majority people of color, which it is, majority female, which it is, because women tend to make things happen, and it's just the truth. I mean, if you look at who's driving the anti-racist movement, a lot of times, it's Black women. And so what I'm trying to do is say, let's celebrate that, but hey, we need white women to do something too. You can't sit on the sideline. So we got them involved. We wanted youth involved. So we wanted to make sure that at least 30% of our board is under 30. So we're trying to do that as well. We've got some high schoolers that are engaged in what we're doing. So we're trying to make sure that we're being very holistic. We're actually global. We've launched a Brazil organization. So we've got ARC Brazil. It has about 20 members. We've launched an Instagram page. We actually have our first ARC Brazil event tonight at 6 p.m. I'm going to be launching a Brazil podcast. I launched an English version of the podcast. We got 10 episodes out there. By the way, 7-8 months ago, I didn't even know what a podcast was. Just to put it in perspective, I had no idea what it was. And now I'm producing, my own podcasts and publishing them. And now about to do one for Brazil. And we've got people who have never really been engaged before that are engaged. And the thing I'm most proud of is we've developed a process for transforming people. And again, some people would say to me like 8 months ago, why don't you just join the BLM movement? Why don't you just get behind anything the NAACP is doing? I said, hey, Those organizations we absolutely need, and we support them, and we're loud about it. But those organizations are focused on really getting legislation changed. BLM is all about getting policing legislation changed. Your NAACP is about getting civil rights legislation changed. There's other organizations that are trying to get voting rights changed. We need that. The only way to change, you got to get some laws changed as well. But our belief is you can change all the laws you want. If you don't change people's hearts, racism's not going away. And so our view is there's really not a lot of organizations working on that. There's nobody targeting white people in the suburbs, Latino people in the suburbs, Africans in the suburbs, African Americans, people like you who are fairly well off, you got good jobs. I'm not saying you all live in the suburbs. Some of you may live in Minneapolis and St. Paul. But the bottom line is a lot of us, and I was one of them just a couple of years ago, I just wasn't as connected. I just wasn't directly in it every day. You can lose kind of touch. And, look, I still live in Chaska, and I can tell you the people out here simply don't feel the impact of racism on a daily basis. So it's easy for them to forget and just not do anything. And with this organization, what we're trying to do is wake them up and get them to understand the only way this country is going to change is if a large enough majority of them decide they're going to put something on the line. We cannot tell white people they're not going to lose something to drive equality and to drive anti-racism. That's just not true. If you're always in the front of the line because your name is A and it's the alphabetical order, remember that when you were in elementary school, you were always first in line, and all of a sudden they change it and now Z's first and you're last, you lost something. But it's fairer, right? So we can't lie to people and say, you're not going to lose. We got to sacrifice. I was willing to sacrifice. I'm willing to sacrifice. I don't care if somebody comes after me, right? But that's where I am in life. What I'm trying to do is create an organization where everybody feels they can sacrifice something. They don't have to do what I'm doing, but at least target the people in your network. So we've created a program based on first helping people erase their ignorance about racism. You'd be shocked how many people really don't know what racism is, don't know where it came from, don't understand that race didn't even exist 500 years ago. Most people don't know any of this. So erase their ignorance about racism. Secondly, it's building their capability and understanding of what anti-racism is, and the concept that being a non-racist is actually being a racist. The non-racist is the guy who sits in the suburbs or downtown, wherever they are, but they say everybody's the same. We're all equal. I don't see color. Not that that's bad, it's just that it gives them an excuse to not fight against systemic and structural racism, to pretend it doesn't exist. And by doing that, it puts a pretty face on racism. It allows it to stay in place. So helping them understand the difference in what is anti-racism. And third is building the confidence, the character, and the courage to then do something about it, to talk to their friends, to talk to their parents. So we've created this program, and we're in the middle of trying to build it to scale so we can take it so everybody can leverage it and we can start drastically increasing the momentum of this change. I'll give you some examples of that this is working. We have one guy, again, white guy, lower 40s, great guy, very, very supportive of anti-racism, but his parents and his family are not. And he's lacked the courage to take them on. His wife got involved with ARC from the very beginning, and she started working on him. I work with her to erase her ignorance, to educate her on anti-racism, and to build her confidence and character, because the job then is to start transforming people in your network. So she started working on her husband. And he built the courage to eventually call his mother and tell his mother, I don't like the way that you guys are. You're going to have to change, or I'm not bringing my kids over there. Now, that took a lot of courage from him, but that's what it's going to take to eliminate racism. Another guy, former Fortune 500 executive, Republican, conservative. He'd been watching what we're doing from the side. seeing my LinkedIn posts, seeing what we're doing on Facebook, listening to podcasts. Eventually he reached out, said, Donzel, can we have a conversation? I said, sure. Again, I'm open there. I'm open to Republicans as long as they're willing to understand racism comes before, tax policy. I agree if you don't want to pay taxes, great, but you can't be supporting racist politicians, right? Okay, so I'm gonna put that on the table first. But we sat down, we had a great conversation. He took notes, called me back a month later. Can we sit down again? Sit down again. And he wasn't declarative, didn't declare one way or another, but just kept asking me questions, wanting to learn. After about the third session, he told me, he said, Donzel, I'm starting to understand now. And he said, yesterday, I was golfing went golfing with my golf buddies. We were in the golf clubhouse. And he said, we're at a table and they started talking about some topics as if we were all on the same team. He didn't say what the topic was, but you can guess what it was. And he said, I stood up and I slammed the table and I said, we're not all on the same team. Now that may sound like a small step to you. That's a big step. And he has continued to every couple months, he contacts me and he's taking more and more and more steps forward. And I continue to reinforce him. You have got to hold them accountable. It's great you made that move. Eventually you got to decide, do you really want to golf with these guys or not? Because as long as you continue to golf with them, you're saying it's okay. That's what the changes we're trying to make. Another Fortune 500 executive. I got to be careful with this one, but again, I'm going to call it like it is. So there was a very, very senior leader, made some comments. I didn't like it. I didn't think he was sensitive. So I called him on it publicly. So this lady is trying to be anti-racist. She's also a friend of this person. So she contacted me. She said, Donzel, I like what you said, but, such and such, he's a good guy. He's trying. I think you misunderstood what he was saying. And actually, she sent me an email. So I got the email, and I'm about to respond to her. Respond to her with a long summary of why she's wrong. But I didn't. I said, you know what? She needs to learn. I'm just going to tell her, thank you for the feedback. So I responded, thank you for the feedback. She got the message. Because 10 minutes later, she called me. And she said, when you responded that way, it made me realize I might be missing something. She said, I've been reading White Fragility. I picked up the book and read, I can't remember what chapter it was, read it again. She said, I protected a racist. She said, you called him out as a white male in power. And instead of me saying, I should talk to him as well, I tried to defend him. She said, that's what you're trying to explain to me that needs to end. I said, you absolutely got it. And I feel so much better. You understood and I didn't have to call you on it. That's what we're trying to change. I'll just give you one more example. This guy's in his 60s, long career as an engineer. You don't know a lot of white engineers, especially white males, very conservative, very, very conservative. And he said, again, after George Floyd's murder, he had to take another look at himself. And so he started doing his own research. I had never met this guy before, but he contacted me and said, I've been watching what you're posting. I've been listening to your podcast. So he contacted me and we had a conversation. And he said, after George Floyd's murder, I realized that I've been living in a bubble. And he said, I was of the perspective that, my parents were poor. I had to work my way through college. Nothing was ever given to me. And so I felt like, hey, why can't they do the same thing? He said, now I'm realizing that even no matter how low I started with white privilege that you never had. And he said, I enrolled in the University of Minnesota to take African-American studies course. This is a white guy in his 60s. He wrote a paper that he sent me on how to justify or how to explain how the American economy was built on the backs of slavery. But he used a formula converting slave labor to equivalency in terms of gallons of petrol fuel to try to monetize it from an engineer's perspective to show the egregiousness of the leveraging of slave labor and how that created this country, and why African Americans deserve reparations. So I'm just telling you these stories just so you get a perspective that we are making a difference, and we feel very confident that if we can scale what we're doing, we can start creating a pretty significant change. And if we work, if groups like BLM and groups like the NAACP and all these other groups are working here on legislation, if we're working on people's hearts and getting people to change and hold their networks accountable, again, it doesn't make any difference if the people I talked about only hold this to themselves. What I'm pushing them on is, you got to talk to your friends. By the way, this white engineer, first I convinced him to work with our Facebook coordinator to provide her with content that middle-aged white guys would understand to get them to start transforming. But now he realizes he's got a post. He can't hide. So now he asked, can I be one of the people who coordinate Facebook so I can talk directly to these white males that need to change? So we believe if we can scale this, we can make this happen. So we've created a strategic plan. It kind of creates the organization and capabilities we need. We're trying to raise about $300,000 over the next 3 years to fund the human capacity, human capital, and the systems capability to build and scale this program that erases ignorance about racism, educates people about anti-racism, and builds their character and confidence so that they can spread it. So we can build that and be able to work with other nonprofits so that we can do it with them for free, work with civic organizations, and then work with companies, big companies like a General Mills or a 3M or a Target, to see if we can get them to roll this out throughout their company as well. Our board has already pledged $35,000 matching grant. We would love for TC band members to be willing to participate in that matching grant. You're the first ones to hear this. We're not rolling out our overall fundraising campaign until June. But this is such a critically important group because of the roles you have, the stature you have in this community, the ability you have to drive change. I thought I would introduce it to you first, give you a chance to get engaged. If you'd like to volunteer, we certainly would love to have you, but we'd also love your financial support as well. So after this, Eric, I can make sure that once we get we got some pledge sort of emails we're pulling together, I'll get that to your group. Any donation helps. $1, $50, $100. They get doubled immediately based on our matching grant. So you see our website listed here. Please check it out. Again, I've been publishing podcasts. There's 10 out there. I think you'll enjoy them. So please take a listen. So Eric, I'm going to stop there to make sure we've got some time for the fireside chat and some Q&A.
Great, thanks, Donzel. Great call to action, great clarity on the mission and the outcomes. Some of those stories are outstanding. The ability to have individual impacts and to change individual lives, change the world one life at a time. Great outcomes, great examples, great scenarios, and a great example of what we can all do to positively impact our community and to drive the social change that we're hoping to achieve. So it takes us, right?